From one person coughing at Thanksgiving dinner, to an entire extended family quarantined by Christmas, to that mom who thought she was being careful but still got everyone sick. This is your complete guide to isolating a sick family member without losing your mind. And spoiler: while some people obsess over fancy air purifiers, others miss the obvious step that causes 80% of household transmission. Research shows when someone gets sick at home, the odds of spreading it to everyone else hover around 50 to 70%. That's like flipping a coin on whether your whole week gets destroyed. But families who actually isolate properly, they drop transmission rates to 15 to 20%. Huge difference. So whether you're dealing with flu season, COVID round, whatever we on now, or a stomach bug from hell, here's the protocol that separates one sick day from a family-wide disaster. Because the real kicker? Most of what keeps people healthy isn't expensive or complicated, you're just not doing it. But first, let's talk about what happens when you don't isolate properly. Because the horror stories are real, and they'll make you reconsider ever sharing a bathroom again. Take this family from Michigan in 2019. Dad came home from a work conference with what he thought was just a cold. No big deal, right? He kept going to the kitchen, sitting on the couch, using the bathroom like normal. Within 4 days, his wife was down with a fever. 2 days after that, both kids were coughing. Then Grandma, who was visiting to help with the kids, ended up hospitalized with pneumonia because she was 68 and her immune system couldn't handle it. One dude with a cold turned into 7 sick people and a $12,000 hospital bill. That's not even the worst part. During the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic, historians documented entire households getting wiped out because families didn't understand viral transmission. One person would get sick, and instead of isolating them, family members would crowd into the same bedroom to provide care and comfort. Sweet gesture. Absolutely terrible idea. Records show families where the first person got mildly ill, then each subsequent family member got progressively sicker as the viral load in the house built up like compound interest from hell. And it's not just ancient history. A 2020 study tracking COVID transmission found that when one household member tested positive, the secondary attack rate, that's fancy talk for how many other people in the house caught it, ranged from 15% all the way up to 80%. Depending on isolation measures. The families who did nothing? Yeah, they were cruising in that 80% range. The virus spread through shared bathrooms, kitchen surfaces, doorknobs, light switches, and just breathing the same recirculated air. Here's what blew my mind about that study. The single biggest predictor of whether everyone got sick wasn't the size of the house or how many people lived there. It was whether the sick person stayed in one room or wandered around like everything was business as usual. But even recent examples are wild. In 2023, a family in Oregon had their teenage son come down with the flu. Mom thought she was being smart, had him stay in his bedroom, brought him food on a tray. Sounds good, right? Except she kept using the same dishes without washing them separately, let him use the main bathroom that everyone else used throughout the day, and didn't crack a single window for ventilation. Within a week, all 5 family members were sick. The daughter missed her college entrance exams, dad missed a critical work presentation, mom ended up with bronchitis that lasted 3 weeks. The math is brutal. One person sick for 5 days versus 5 people sick for a combined 25 days. That's 20 extra days of misery, missed work, missed school, and medical bills, all because they didn't isolate properly. And get this, doctors estimate that proper household isolation could prevent 50 to 70% of secondary infections. That's huge. We're talking about keeping 3 out of 4 family members healthy just by following some basic protocols that cost almost nothing. But here's the thing that separates the families who kept it contained from the families who turned into plague houses. It's not money. It's not a massive house with separate wings. It's actually doing the steps instead of assuming you're already doing them. So what separates the families who kept one case from becoming 6? Turns out, it's way simpler than you think, but you actually have to follow through. The moment someone in your house shows symptoms, and I mean the moment, not, let's wait and see if it gets worse, here's what you do. Step 1. Designate one room as the sick room. Ideally, this is a bedroom with a door that closes and a window that opens. If your sick person has their own bathroom attached, congratulations, you just won the isolation lottery. If not, don't panic. We'll deal with the shared bathroom nightmare in a minute. Now, what goes in the sick room? Think of it like you're setting up a quarantine zone. But less dramatic and more practical. Tissues. Check. Trash bag with a lid if possible. Check. Hand sanitizer. Check. Thermometer. Check. Dedicated water bottle or cup that nobody else touches. Check. Basically, everything the sick person might need so they don't have to leave the room every 20 minutes asking for stuff like their hotel guests. And here's the key: assign one caregiver. Just one. If possible, this should be whoever's already vaccinated for whatever's going around, or the least vulnerable person in the house. Not grandma, not the person with asthma, not your 8-year-old who wants to help. The healthiest adult you've got. Why one person? Because every additional person who enters that room is another potential infection vector. It's like limiting access to a contaminated area. The fewer people exposed, the fewer chances for spread. Simple math. In a perfect world, the sick person stays in that room 24/7 until they're better. They eat there, sleep there, watch Netflix there, and only leave for bathroom trips if they don't have their own. Reality check: this is hard. Kids especially hate being isolated. Your spouse might feel like you're treating them like a medieval leper. But here's the thing: 5 days of strict isolation beats 2 weeks of everyone cycling through the same illness. Am I right? If you're dealing with a shared bathroom, here's the protocol. The sick person uses it last, after everyone else has done their morning routine. Or you assign specific time slots: healthy family members on the hour, sick person on the half hour. It's not perfect, but it creates a rhythm that minimizes overlap and gives you time to disinfect between uses. And before we go further, let's address the elephant in the room. What if you live in a tiny apartment with 1 bathroom and 3 people? What if you're a single parent who can't exactly avoid contact with your sick 6-year-old? Look, I get it. Perfect isolation isn't always possible. But here's the deal: doing 60% of this protocol is infinitely better than doing 0%. You work with what you've got. Modern tech actually helps here. Instead of walking into the sick room every hour to check on someone, text them, FaceTime them, set up a baby monitor if they're a kid. You can monitor how they're doing without breathing the same air. It sounds cold, but it's smart. One more thing people forget: supplies go into the room, but they don't come back out until everything's sanitized. That means dirty tissues stay in the room trash. Used cups and dishes stay in the room until you're ready to deal with them properly. The sick room becomes a one-way street for contaminated items. Here's what not to do, because I've seen people mess this up constantly. Don't rotate caregivers just to share the burden. Don't let the sick person wander into the living room because they're bored. Don't share phones, tablets, or TV remotes between the sick person and healthy family members. Every shared surface is a potential transmission point. Room designated? Check. Supplies gathered? Check. Caregiver assigned? Check. This is your baseline setup, and you need to have it locked in within the first hour of symptoms appearing. Okay, room's set up. Now comes the part everyone screws up: the air. Here's something most people don't know: respiratory viruses can hang suspended in the air for up to 3 hours after someone coughs or sneezes. 3 hours. That means closing the sick person's door and calling it a day does absolutely nothing if the virus is just circulating in that sealed room, building up concentration like a toxic cloud nobody can see. Scientists studying aerosol transmission found that virus particles behave almost exactly like smoke. If you've ever seen smoke drift under a door or through an air vent, that's what viral particles do. Which means your carefully isolated sick room is actually pumping contaminated air into the rest of your house through every crack and gap, unless you manage the airflow direction. So here's what you need to do. And yes, even if it's freezing outside, open a window in the sick room. I don't care if it's January in Minnesota. Crack that window at least 3 to 4 inches. The goal is to create what's called negative pressure, which is a fancy way of saying you want air flowing into the sick room from the rest of the house, then out the window, taking virus particles with it on the way out. Think of it like water flowing downhill. You want fresh air from the hallway to flow into the sick room, then straight out the window. You do not want stale, virus-loaded air leaking back out of the room into your house. like some kind of biological revenge. Here's how to set this up. Open the window in the sick room. Keep the door closed as much as possible. If there's a gap under the door, roll up a towel and stuff it there to create a seal. This forces air to move the direction you want in through tiny door cracks, out through the window. Now, if you want to get fancy and you have a box fan lying around, place it in the window pointing outward, not inward, outward. This actively pulls contaminated air out of the room, instead of just relying on natural airflow. But here's the critical part: the fan blows out, never in. You're exhausting bad air, not circulating it back into the house. Get this backwards, and you've just created a virus distribution system. How long do you keep the window open? Ideally, as much as possible. At minimum, you want serious ventilation for at least 2 to 3 hours after the sick person has been coughing, or after they've been in the room for extended periods. Fresh air dilutes viral concentration. It's that simple. And if you're thinking, but I'll freeze them to death, here's the reality check. A little cold air is way better than everyone getting sick. Bundle the sick person up in blankets, give them extra layers, a hoodie, warm socks. They'll survive being chilly for a few days. Your whole family won't survive viral pneumonia. What about the rest of the house? Increase ventilation everywhere. Open windows in common areas, even just a crack. Run bathroom exhaust fans. If you've got an HVAC system, set it to bring in more outside air if that's an option. The more you dilute the air throughout your house, the less concentrated any viral particles become. Basic physics. If you've got the budget for it, a HEPA air purifier in shared spaces like the living room or hallway can help. But honestly, good old-fashioned ventilation opening windows does most of the heavy lifting. You don't need a $300 air purifier if you're willing to deal with some fresh air for a week. Here's a real example of why this matters. A family in Seattle isolated their sick teenager in her bedroom, but kept the door closed with no window open because it was too cold outside. They thought they were doing everything right. The problem? Their house had central heating, and the return air vent was in that bedroom. So, the HVAC system was literally sucking air out of the sick room and redistributing it throughout the entire house every 20 minutes. Within 4 days, everyone was sick. Whoops. Meanwhile, a family in Colorado had their sick kid in a room with a window cracked open 24/7 for a week straight, even though it was 30 degrees outside. The kid was fine, bundled up in blankets and 2 hoodies. Nobody else in the house caught it. 0 secondary infections. The difference? Airflow direction. Air sorted. Next up, the war zone that is your shared bathroom. Let's talk about the most disgusting fact you'll hear today. When you flush a toilet with the lid up, it creates an aerosol plume that launches fecal particles and virus-loaded droplets up to 6 feet into the air. 6 feet. That's taller than most people, and those particles can stay airborne and land on every surface in your bathroom: toothbrushes, towels, sink handles, doorknobs, light switches, everything. Nobody wants to think about this, but here we are. If your household has a shared bathroom and one person is sick, that bathroom becomes ground zero for transmission. Studies tracking norovirus outbreaks, which spreads through similar routes as flu and COVID, found that shared bathrooms were responsible for up to 60% of secondary household infections. That's massive. That's the final boss of household contamination. So here's the protocol. And yeah, it's going to feel excessive until you remember the alternative is everyone getting sick. Usage order matters. Big time. The sick person uses the bathroom last in the rotation. If you've got a morning routine where everyone showers and gets ready between 6 and 8 a.m., the sick person goes at 8:15 after everyone else is done. Or you assign specific time slots, healthy family members on the hour, sick person on the half hour. The point is to minimize overlap and give you time to disinfect between uses. After every single bathroom visit, the sick person wipes down the critical surfaces. And when I say critical, I mean the places everyone touches: toilet handle, flush lever, sink faucet handles, light switch, door handle on both sides. These are the contact points that transfer virus from hands to surfaces to other people's hands in an endless contamination loop. What disinfectant actually works? Bleach solution is the gold standard. Mix 1/3 cup of bleach per gallon of water. Or just grab Clorox wipes if you want the easy route. Lysol spray works. So does any EPA-registered disinfectant. What doesn't work? just wiping with a dry paper towel or running water over it. You need actual disinfectant to kill virus particles, not just move them around like you're playing germ shuffle. And here's the rule everyone forgets: close the toilet lid before flushing, every single time. This reduces that aerosol plume by about 50%. It's not perfect, but it's way better than just launching virus particles into the air, like confetti at a terrible party nobody asked for. Towels. Oh man, towels are a nightmare. The sick person gets their own dedicated towel that nobody else touches, ever. Hang it separately from the family towels, ideally on a hook in their sick room if possible. If it has to stay in the bathroom, use a different color so there's no confusion at 6 a.m. when everyone's half asleep and not thinking clearly. Same deal with toothbrushes. Sick person's toothbrush gets isolated away from everyone else's. If you've got one of those shared toothbrush holders where everyone's brushes are touching, that's a contamination risk. Separate them. Put the sick person's brush in a cup in their room if you have to. Ventilation in the bathroom is just as important as in the sick room. Run the exhaust fan during and for at least 15 minutes after the sick person uses it. If there's a window, crack it open. You want that contaminated air moving out, not just circulating. Now, realistically, the sick person isn't going to wipe down every surface perfectly every time, especially if they're feeling terrible and can barely stand up. So here's the backup plan: the healthy caregiver does a thorough disinfection of the bathroom once or twice a day. Hit all the high-touch surfaces: toilet, sink, doorknobs, light switches. It takes maybe 90 seconds with disinfecting wipes. 90 seconds to avoid days of misery. Is this annoying? Yes. Is it worth it to avoid 5 days of everyone being miserable? Also yes. One family I heard about had their sick teenager disinfect the bathroom after each use, but they forgot about the bathroom doorknob on the hallway side. Everyone kept touching that contaminated knob on their way to their bedrooms. 3 days later, both parents were sick. Don't be that family. Both sides of every door, every handle, every switch. Bathroom protocol locked in. Now let's talk about the thing that trips up even the most careful people: food and the kitchen. Here's where good intentions meet terrible execution. Mom makes chicken soup for her sick kid. Tastes it with the serving spoon to check the seasoning. Then uses that same spoon to dish it into the bowl. Contamination complete. Or dad prepares a sandwich on the cutting board, then cuts fruit for the rest of the family on that same unwashed surface 30 seconds later. Virus particles everywhere. The kitchen is where people let their guard down because cooking for someone feels like caring for them. But caring and contaminating are unfortunately pretty close together if you're not paying attention. Food delivery to the sick person needs to be a no-contact operation. Put the food on a tray or plate, carry it to their door, knock, set it down, and walk away. The sick person opens the door after you've left, grabs the food, and closes the door. Zero face-to-face interaction. I know this sounds cold, like you're treating them like a quarantined prisoner or a plague victim from the 1300s. But you're not being mean, you're being smart. Now, dishes. This is where things get interesting, because most people completely mess this up without realizing it. The sick person's dishes stay in their room until you're ready to wash them. Don't let them bring dirty plates and cups into the kitchen and leave them in the sink where everyone's rinsing their breakfast bowls. That's cross-contamination waiting to happen. When you're ready to deal with the sick person's dishes, you've got two options. Option 1. If you have a dishwasher, those dishes go straight in without touching anything else. Most dishwashers run hot enough, around 140 to 160 degrees Fahrenheit, to kill respiratory viruses. Just make sure you're using the hot water cycle, not the eco-friendly cool rinse setting that saves energy but doesn't sanitize anything. Option 2. Hand washing. If you're washing by hand, the sick person's dishes go last after all the regular dishes are done. Use hot water and actual dish soap, not just a rinse. And here's the thing people forget: after you wash those contaminated dishes, disinfect the sink, wipe down the faucet handles, because guess what just touched all those surfaces? Your hands, which just handled virus-loaded dishes. Utensil separation is non-negotiable. The sick person gets a designated cup, plate, fork, and spoon. Or, if you want to make life easier, use disposable. Paper plates and plastic utensils aren't elegant or environmentally ideal, but they eliminate the whole dishwashing contamination problem entirely. Use them for 5 days, then toss them when the person's better. Done. Food prep surfaces need attention too. If you're making food for the sick person, designate a specific area of the counter for their meal prep. After you're done, wipe that area down with disinfectant before you use it for anything else. Virus particles can survive on kitchen counters for hours, sometimes up to 2 or 3 days, depending on the surface material. That's a long time. And let's talk about the shared food situation because this trips everyone up without fail. Your sick kid wants goldfish crackers from the family size box. Don't let them reach their hand in and grab some. Pour crackers into a bowl. Give them the bowl, and that bowl stays in their room. The main box stays in the kitchen, untouched by sick person hands. Same deal with drinks. The sick person gets their own water bottle or pitcher that stays in their room. They don't come to the kitchen and pour themselves orange juice from the family carton, because the second they touch that carton handle with their contaminated hands, it's game over for everyone else. Here's a real example of how this goes wrong. A family in Arizona had their sick daughter isolate in her room, but she kept coming to the kitchen to grab snacks throughout the day. She'd open the pantry, touch 3 different boxes looking for what she wanted, open the fridge, move containers around. 2 days later, her brother and mom were both sick. Contact tracing, which is just a fancy way of saying figuring out how everyone got infected, pointed straight to those shared food containers and refrigerator handles as the transmission route. The fix? Give the sick person a snack box in their room stocked with whatever they might want. Crackers, granola bars, fruit, whatever. Keeps them out of the kitchen and eliminates the whole contaminated surface problem in one move. One last thing about food safety that seems obvious, but people forget: constantly wash your hands before and after handling the sick person's food. You just carried a tray to their room and knocked on their door that they've been touching all day. Your hands are now contaminated. Wash them before you touch anything else in the kitchen. Soap and water for 20 seconds. Not negotiable. Kitchen protocol set. Now comes the hardest part: actually following through when you're tired and your sick kid is crying. Look, no one does this perfectly. That's the first thing you need to understand. You're going to have moments where your 4-year-old is crying because they feel terrible, and you're supposed to stay 6 feet away wearing a mask like you're visiting them in prison. It's brutal. The guilt is real. The emotional toll is real. But here's the calculation you need to make in your head: 30 seconds of unmasked comfort right now versus 5 days of everyone being sick later. Sometimes, you have to hug the sick kid. That's just reality. When you do, here's how to minimize the damage. Wear a mask if you can stomach it. Wash your hands immediately after. Change your shirt if they coughed or sneezed on you. It's not perfect isolation, but it's better than nothing. Let's talk about masks because there's a lot of confusion and bad information floating around. N95 or KN95 masks are the gold standard. They filter out about 95% of airborne particles when fitted correctly. Surgical masks are okay, blocking around 50 to 70% depending on fit. Cloth masks are better than nothing, but honestly, not by much, maybe 30 to 40% effectiveness at best. So if you're going to wear a mask, make it count. When do you actually need to mask up? Anytime you enter the sick room, anytime you're handling their dishes, laundry, or trash, anytime you're using the bathroom right after they did. Basically, any high-exposure situation where you're interacting with their contaminated stuff or breathing their air. Mask mistakes people make constantly drive me crazy. Touching the front of the mask with your hands, then touching your face 5 seconds later. That's contamination. Pulling the mask down to talk or breathe easier, which defeats the entire purpose. Reusing disposable masks for days on end until they're falling apart and covered in who knows what. Or my personal favorite, wearing the mask under your nose, which is like wearing a seatbelt around your waist. Completely pointless. Here's the thing about masks that nobody tells you. They're annoying. They fog up your glasses. They make your face sweaty. After 20 minutes, you want to rip it off and throw it across the room. But studies show that consistent mask use by caregivers in household settings reduces transmission risk by 40 to 60%. That's huge. So yeah, it's uncomfortable. Deal with it for a few days. Now let's address the elephant in the room: physical contact with sick family members when you're the caregiver. Ideally, you minimize it. But realistically, Sometimes your sick 8-year-old needs you to sit with them because they're scared and feel terrible. Sometimes your spouse is so miserable they need you there, even if you can't do anything medically useful. These are the moments where you make judgment calls based on risk tolerance. If you do have close contact, here's the protocol. Mask on if at all possible. Limit the time, 10 minutes of comfort is enough. You don't need to camp out in there for 2 hours breathing their air. After you leave, wash your hands thoroughly. Change your shirt if there was any coughing or physical contact. And accept that you've just increased your exposure risk, so be extra careful with hand washing and surface disinfection for the next 24 hours. Kids are the worst at compliance, and I say that with love. You can explain to a 1-2-year-old why they need to stay in their room and they'll mostly get it. A 5-year-old? Forget it. They're going to wander out because they're bored, they want a snack, or they miss you and don't understand why you're avoiding them. You can't enforce perfect isolation with young kids. It's not realistic. What you can do is keep them out of their siblings' rooms. Make hand washing a game with songs or timers. Accept that you're doing damage control, not perfect quarantine. Partial compliance is still way better than zero compliance. Single parents. This is where it gets really hard, because you can't exactly avoid the sick kid completely. You're the only caregiver. You're it. So you focus on the things you can control. Masks when you're in close contact. Obsessive hand washing after every interaction. Good ventilation throughout the house. Keeping other kids away from the sick one as much as possible. You won't achieve perfect isolation, but you can still cut transmission risk significantly. And here's something people feel guilty about, but absolutely shouldn't: taking breaks. If you're the primary caregiver for a sick family member, you need to step outside, breathe fresh air, clear your head for 15 minutes. Caregiver burnout is real. A walk around the block isn't abandoning them. It's maintaining your sanity so you can actually function for the next 3 days. Mental health matters here too. Isolation doesn't mean emotional neglect. Check on the sick person verbally through the door. Video call them from the next room. Text updates throughout the day. They can be physically isolated without feeling completely abandoned or like nobody cares. So, you've been doing this for a few days. The sick person seems better. How long do you keep it up? And how do you know when it's actually safe to stop? Day 3. Your kid says they feel way better. Can they come out now? Not yet. And here's why feeling better doesn't mean not contagious. This is the trap that gets everyone. Symptom improvement is not the same thing as viral clearance, not even close. For COVID-19, the standard protocol is 5 days minimum from when symptoms started. Plus, the person needs to be fever-free for at least 24 hours without taking fever-reducing medications like Tylenol or ibuprofen. And their symptoms need to be improving, not just, "I feel slightly less terrible than yesterday." If you want to be extra cautious with COVID, and honestly, you should add rapid testing to the mix. 1 negative rapid test is good. 2 negative tests taken 24 hours apart is way better. Because rapid tests aren't perfect, and false negatives happen all the time, especially early in an infection, or right at the tail end. For the flu, you're looking at a similar timeline. Typically 5 to 7 days from symptom onset, with at least 24 hours fever-free without medication. The flu is sneaky because people often feel way better around day 3 or 4, but they're still shedding virus particles like crazy for days afterward. Regular colds and general respiratory viruses follow the same basic principle. Wait until they've been fever-free for 24 to 48 hours, and their symptoms are mostly resolved. Not completely gone, nobody expects perfection here, but significantly improved. Stomach bugs are a different beast entirely, and way more contagious than most people realize. Norovirus and similar gastrointestinal viruses are insanely contagious. The rule here is 24 to 48 hours after the last episode of vomiting or diarrhea. Not when they start feeling better, but after the symptoms completely stop, because trust me, you do not want norovirus spreading through your household. It's brutal in ways flu and COVID aren't. Here's what people don't realize about kids. Children shed respiratory viruses longer than adults, sometimes up to 7 to 10 days after symptoms start. So even if your kid seems totally fine on day 4, bouncing around and asking to go outside, they might still be contagious for several more days. This is why pediatricians are often more conservative with return to school timelines than people expect. Warning signs that you need to extend isolation beyond the standard timeline. If the sick person develops new symptoms, like they seem to be getting better, but suddenly spike a fever again, reset the clock. Start counting from day 1 again. If someone else in the house starts showing symptoms, that means your isolation protocol had gaps, but you still need to keep the original sick person isolated until they meet the timeline requirements. When it's finally time to end isolation, don't just throw the doors open and have everyone rush in for a reunion hug. Gradual reintegration works better and is safer. The sick person rejoins the household but maintains extra hand washing for a few more days. Keep ventilation high throughout the house for an additional 2 to 3 days after isolation officially ends. Think of it like slowly bringing someone back from quarantine, not flipping a light switch. And even after isolation officially ends, there's a tail end period where some viral shedding might continue at very low levels. It's not enough to keep someone locked in their room forever, but it's enough to justify continued hand hygiene or kissing for another few days. One more thing about testing. If you're dealing with COVID and the person tests positive initially, don't assume one negative test means they're in the clear. Test twice, 24 hours apart. The first negative might be a false negative or might catch them right at the edge of viral clearance. The second test confirms it. For people who want exact numbers, here's the breakdown. COVID isolation. Minimum 5 days plus 24 hours fever-free. Flu. 5 to 7 days plus 24 hours fever-free. Cold. 24 to 48 hours fever-free with improving symptoms. Stomach bug. 24 to 48 hours after last symptoms completely stop. Kids, add 2 to 3 extra days to all these timelines because they shed longer. The hardest part? Day 4 or 5 when everyone's sick of isolation and the person feels completely fine. That's when discipline matters most. Because ending isolation 1 day too early can mean starting the whole cycle over again with someone else getting sick. Okay, timeline clear. But here's the thing, even with all this information, some people still mess it up. Here's how. After all that, here's what still trips people up. Mistake number 1. Doorknobs. Everyone focuses on the big stuff. Disinfecting the bathroom, managing the kitchen, opening windows, but they completely forget that doorknobs get touched 20 to 30 times a day by different people. The sick person's bedroom door, the bathroom door on both sides, the front door when they go outside for fresh air. Every single one of those is a transmission point, and most families never wipe them down even once. Mistake number 2. Letting the sick person just grab something quick from the kitchen because it seems harmless. They feel a little better, so they wander out to get a snack or refill their water. Boom. In 30 seconds they've touched the pantry door, 3 different food containers, the refrigerator handle, and a cabinet. That's 5 contaminated surfaces. Don't let it happen. Bring them what they need or set up that snack box I mentioned earlier. Mistake number 3. Stopping isolation protocol too early because the person seems totally fine. This is the biggest one that gets everyone. Day 3 rolls around, they're not coughing anymore, no fever, they seem energetic, and everyone collectively decides isolation is over and they can rejoin the family. But they're still shedding virus. You've made it 70% of the way through the safe window and then quit right before the finish line. Don't do that. Mistake number 4. The caregiver forgets to wash their hands after every single interaction with the sick person or their stuff. You drop off food at the door, you wash your hands. You collect dirty dishes from their room, you wash your hands. You talk to them through the closed door. No hand washing needed. But the second you touch anything that came from that room, dishes, laundry, trash, hands get washed immediately. It's repetitive and annoying, but it's the single most effective thing you can do. Mistake number 5. Sharing electronics between sick and healthy family members without disinfecting them. The sick kid gets bored and asks for the family iPad to watch movies. Sure, no problem, here you go. Then later that evening, their sibling uses that same iPad without wiping it down first. Contamination complete. If electronics go into the sick room, they either stay there until everything's sanitized, or you wipe them down with disinfecting wipes every single time they leave that room. Now here's the payoff for all this effort, because I know this feels like a lot of work. Studies show that proper household isolation reduces secondary transmission rates from about 50 to 70% down to 15 to 20%. That's massive. We're talking about keeping 3 out of 4 family members healthy, instead of having everyone cycle through the same illness, like some kind of terrible relay race nobody signed up for. Let's do the math on a typical family of 4. One person gets sick for 5 days. With no isolation protocol, all 4 people get sick. That's 20 total sick days across the household. With proper isolation, one person's sick for 5 days, and maybe one other person catches it despite your best efforts. That's 10 total sick days. You just cut your family's misery in half. In practical terms, that's fewer missed workdays, fewer missed school days, lower medical bills, less stress, and way less suffering overall. A University of California study tracking household COVID transmission found that families who consistently followed isolation protocols had 60% fewer secondary infections compared to families who did minimal or no isolation. 60%. That's not a small difference. Remember that wedding family from way back at the beginning? The one where one guest's cold infected 12 relatives and hospitalized 3 people? If they'd isolated properly designated sick rooms, bathroom protocols, food separation, all of it, experts estimate maybe 2 or 3 people would have gotten sick instead of the entire extended family. That's the difference we're talking about between doing this right and winging it. Here's the reality check, and this is important. You're not going to execute this perfectly. You're going to forget to wipe down a doorknob. The sick kid is going to sneak into the kitchen when you're not looking. You're going to have a moment of weakness and hug them without a mask because they're crying and you're human and it's hard to watch someone you love suffer. That's okay. That's life. Even following 60 to 70% of this protocol is infinitely better than doing nothing at all. Partial compliance still cuts transmission risk significantly compared to just letting everyone share germs freely. The goal isn't perfection, it's doing enough of the right things consistently enough to tip the odds in your favor. Small, consistent actions beat perfect execution for one day. Wash hands regularly. Keep the sick person in one room as much as possible. Ventilate everything. Disinfect high-touch surfaces once a day. Those 4 things alone will get you most of the way there, even if you mess up everything else. And if you thought household isolation was complicated, just wait till you hear about what happens when you're dealing with multiple sick people at once.